Hi everyone, welcome to week 2 of the semester. I really enjoyed reading your introductions and getting to learn a little bit more about you as people. It sounds as if we have a really great group of diverse and interesting people who are going to bring a whole range of perspectives to what we do in the course. By now, I hope you're feeling comfortable with our digital classroom and our plan for the semester. If not, please feel free to email me or else post a question on the discussion board. I really want everyone to feel confident, as this week we're going to be moving into starting to look at the material. We're going to be focusing on Andy Weir's The Martian and are going to be discussing a range of topics related to it. We're going to be looking at how it uses science, how it uses humor, how it characterizes Mark, and also humanity in general. Then we're also going to be looking at the film adaptation of it and comparing it with the book. So it's going to be a busy week, but I hope an enjoyable one. Before I set you free to look at The Martian, though, I want to talk a little bit about science fiction as a genre. And I want to go through some definitions that scholars, writers, and critics have come up with. So if you'll give me a minute to bring up my PowerPoint, we'll go right ahead. So my PowerPoint should be up on the screen now, so we can talk a little bit about science fiction and its definitions. I want to start out by making the point that science fiction is an exceptionally diverse genre. As I hope you discovered in your explorations in the first week, it encompasses a whole range of stories, places, objects, events. And so it's really hard to pin down what science fiction is. The definition of the genre is actually highly contentious. It's debated by writers, scholars, and critics, all of whom have their own take on what science fiction is. So I'm going to be presenting one set of definitions today, and they're probably going to strike you as pretty consistent and coherent, as having a lot in common. However, I want you to be aware that that's not actually too reflective of the state of the field. In a couple of weeks, I'm going to be giving you another set that's going to challenge these definitions and give you a whole different perspective on the genre. So I wanted to give you just 5 or 6 different definitions of science fiction by a range of people. The first one comes from the critic Benjamin Apple, from his book, The Fantastic Mirror. And he says that science fiction reflects scientific thought, a fiction of things to come based on things at hand. Another definition comes from the famous writer Isaac Asimov. He was one of the great masters of science fiction, who wrote books like I, Robot and also the Foundation series. He's one of the best-known authors in the genre. And he says, modern science fiction is the only form of literature that consistently considers the nature of the changes that face us, the possible consequences, and the possible solutions. It's that branch of literature which is concerned with the impact of scientific advance upon human beings. Our next definition comes from Hugo Gernsback, who was a famous editor of science fiction. He edited a bunch of science fiction journals and magazines. And if you're familiar with the Hugo Awards, the awards for science fiction, they're named after Hugo Gernsback. So he's a really influential figure. This is what he says science fiction is. Science fiction can be defined as imaginative extrapolation of true natural phenomena existing now or likely to exist in the future. Good science fiction must be based on true science, science as interpreted and understood by responsible scientists. In other words, the story should be in the realm of the possible. And just as a note, extrapolation means projection. It means looking at what's happening now and thinking ahead to the future to see what will happen next. So I might look at the state of, say, communication technology at the moment. I might look at trends happening within it. And I might say, okay, in 200 years, communication technology is going to be this or that. That's what extrapolation involves. The next definition comes from James E. Gunn, who edited 2 volumes of science fiction that really attempted to give a historical overview of the whole genre. And in the foreword to these volumes, he gave this definition of science fiction. Science fiction is the branch of literature that deals with the effects of change on people in the real world, as it can be projected onto the past, the future, or distant places. It often concerns itself with scientific or technological change, and it usually involves matters whose importance is greater than the individual or the community. Often civilization or the human race itself is in danger. Robert Heinlein is another famous writer of science fiction. If you're familiar with Starship Troopers, he wrote the original book of that. He also wrote books like The Moon is the Harsh Mistress and The Cat Who Walked Through Time. Heinlein's definition of science fiction is as follows: realistic speculation about possible future events based solidly on adequate knowledge of the real world, past and present, and on a thorough understanding of the nature and significance of the scientific method. And our last definition comes from another science fiction author, Theodore Sturgeon. He said, a science fiction story is a story built around human beings, with a human problem and a human solution, which would not have happened at all without its scientific content. Now, as you've been paying attention, I'm sure that you've noticed some common threads within those definitions, some points that the various authors and critics and writers kept coming back to over and over again. So just to spell those out for you, the definitions really foregrounded scientific realism or plausibility. It says that science fiction should be concerned with good science, with what is scientifically possible, with obeying the rules of chemistry and physics and math. So it's different from fantasy in that it should be grounded in real, possible, plausible science. They also point out that although science fiction can be written about any time period, past, present, or future, it tends to have a future orientation. It tends to look ahead at what is to come. At the same time, it also tends to have a human orientation, according to them. It's interested in humans. It's interested in humans as affected by science. And in particular, it's interested in the effects that change, technological advancement, scientific advancement will have on human beings. Now, as I say, this is just one set of definitions, and we'll look at others that challenge them and contradict them. However, I think as definitions for thinking about the Martian, they're pretty good. The Martian has almost all of these features. As I'm sure you could tell, it's really grounded in scientific realism, in doing the work for science and math. It has a future orientation. We can't send manned missions to Mars at the moment, but hopefully in several years and several decades, we'll be able to do that. It also has a human orientation. It's focused on Mark's attempts to survival on Mars. And it's also focused on the effects of change. So what happens when we send people to Mars? What problems can that cause? What tragedies might arise? How can humans like Mark adapt to that? So we're now going to continue to look deeper into the Martian. And I'm really interested in you sharing your thoughts and ideas about the novel. So I'm going to turn it over to you now, and I look forward to seeing what you have to say. Until week 3, I'll see you on the message boards. Bye, take care.